When you quit a highly addictive behavior, like for example porn use, you will experience withdrawals. And one of those withdrawal symptoms is especially brutal. If you don't know how to face this, it will make you give up and relapse. And it may even scare you away from ever trying to quit again. It's called anhedonia. Keep watching this video because right here I'm going to arm you with everything you need to know to make sure that anhedonia does not make you relapse. So even if this symptom does hit you during your withdrawals, you'll know how to deal with it and how to get through it. So stick around to discover exactly what anhedonia is, why it happens, how long it lasts, and what you can do to make it easier to get through it. So what is anhedonia? In short, it's a state of joylessness. There's a word related to anhedonia that you might have heard of before: hedonism. A definition of hedonism is the pursuit of pleasurable experiences. Anhedonia is essentially the opposite of that. It is an inability to have those pleasurable experiences. In practice, it means that you suddenly find yourself in a state where everything just feels dull and grey and joyless. And not only can't you find pleasure in anything anymore, but also you aren't motivated. You can't get yourself to seek out experiences that might make you feel better, and you might even struggle just with your very basic self-care. As you can tell from this description, anhedonia is really brutal. Anhedonia is one of the withdrawal symptoms that can happen when you quit some highly addictive behavior or substance. To understand why this happens, imagine the following. Let's say you always eat spicy food. The spicier the better. You always add the hottest hot sauce to your food. You chomp down devil peppers like it's nothing. You're an absolute spice fiend. But then imagine that for some reason your doctor tells you you have some condition that means you have to stop eating spicy foods. You can't do this anymore. And by the way, I'm just making this up. I don't think a condition like this exists, but for the sake of the example, imagine you go from super spicy to suddenly there's some reason why you aren't allowed to have spices anymore. Can you imagine what that would be like when you start eating food without spices added? You just have like normally seasoned food. To you, this would taste like nothing. It would be like eating cardboard. Why? Because you've blasted your taste buds with such extreme stimulation, with such extreme levels of spiciness for so long that you've become desensitized. This is a natural reaction that the body has to extreme stimulation. It reacts by desensitization. And because you've been so used to this extreme level of spiciness, it will take a while before that sensitivity in your taste buds comes back. Eventually, you will be able to taste normally seasoned food again, but right now, in that transition period from extreme spice to no spice, everything just seems completely tasteless. And as a result, you'll find it impossible to experience pleasure from eating normally seasoned food. Anhedonia is exactly like this. Highly stimulating things like watching porn or certain drugs and substances give you this extreme stimulation. In your brain, they create this extremely large dopamine spike, and you're giving yourself that stimulation again and again and again. Plus, addiction always leads to escalation. So you have a tendency to seek more and more extreme stimulation, or for example, to use porn longer or more often over time. And as a result, you have the desensitization. Just like your taste buds become desensitized by all of this spice, your brain becomes desensitized by all of this extreme stimulation. Then, when you cut out that stimulation, you stop watching porn, you stop using drugs, what happens? Compared to the extreme levels of stimulation you were used to, everything now seems bland and joyless. In other words, you're no longer able to enjoy the simple things in life. And just like in our story about the spicy food, it will simply take time for that sensitivity to slowly reset to a normal level. You have to get through that cardboard phase. There's no other way. You may have heard about the flatline phenomenon that happens to some people when they quit porn. Anhedonia is not the same as the flatline. The flatline is a similar phenomenon, but it specifically affects your libido, your sex drive. Whereas anhedonia affects you more broadly, it affects your overall mood and well-being. Anhedonia and the flatline can occur at the same time, and they sometimes do, but they are two separate phenomena. If you want to learn more about exactly what the flatline is and how to deal with it, watch my separate video on that topic. If you experience anhedonia, there are two things you absolutely need to avoid. The first is relapsing. Obviously, when everything feels joyless, you will want to get back to the one source of stimulation that makes you feel something, which will be whatever your addiction of choice was. But if you do give in and start using again, All that does is put you back into that cycle of desensitization that got you into this state in the first place. It's clearly not a solution. The second mistake you need to avoid is to replace one source of stimulation with a different one. So for example, you quit porn and you feel that need for some stimulation and you become a social media addict instead, or you start smoking weed, or you do something else to try and give yourself that hit you crave so much. For your recovery and for your brain's ability to reset to a healthy baseline, this is almost as bad as relapsing. Plus, there's a good chance that doing this kind of thing actually makes your anhedonia period more drawn out and makes it worse. By still giving yourself some source of stimulation, even if it's not from your main addiction, you can put yourself in a state where you almost maintain that level of misery that you're at and not let your brain actually do the healing it's trying to do. So what can you do to get through the period of anhedonia? There are 3 things I recommend. Number 1, a generally healthy lifestyle. If you have a generally healthy lifestyle, it will help your brain and body's healing process. And on the other hand, if you have a generally unhealthy lifestyle, your body will still heal, but it just takes longer. For your brain health specifically, here are the most important lifestyle factors. Get enough sleep. Make sure you get exercise and movement every day. I really can't overstate how important this is. Exercise is basically the best way to increase levels of BDNF in your brain. And BDNF is essentially the thing that helps your brain heal and rewire and create new connections. This is exactly what you need when you're going through recovery. And eat healthy, unprocessed foods. There's a lot of debate about the specifics of what is a healthy diet or what is the healthiest diet, but I think we can all agree that your body needs the basic building blocks in order to heal and rebuild itself, and we get a lot of that from food. Regardless of dietary specifics, your best bet is to focus as much as possible on unprocessed whole foods. Like, the more recognizable something is as real food, the more likely it is to be healthy. Number 2, make it worse for yourself. So this is kind of the inverse of what we talked about before. You will have the tendency to seek stimulation, to seek distraction, to somehow make yourself feel better. But ironically, if you want to get through the anhedonia period faster, it's actually better to kind of make it worse for yourself. The suffering you're experiencing during anhedonia is part of the healing process. I believe that this is basically the same for your mental health as it is for your physical health. So for example, if you have a fever, of course that doesn't feel good. But the fever itself is actually part of your body healing. What you're feeling is your body's response to an invasion of a virus or bacteria or whatever. This is part of the solution. The pain you feel is the healing process. And I think the same applies to anhedonia. The pain you feel, the discomfort you feel is part of your brain and mind resetting and healing and getting better. And so like I mentioned before, it's a mistake to seek out stimulation and distraction and try to get a hit from somewhere, because all of this stimulation is what got you in this mess to begin with. What's better to do is the opposite. Do a dopamine detox. Go even deeper into non-stimulation. So if it is a porn addiction that you're withdrawing from, also cut out social media. Stop watching movies and shows. Stop playing video games. Just let yourself soak in the suffering for a bit. And that will make the whole thing go by quicker. Think of it like this. It already sucks to be you right now. You might as well lean into it and rip off the band-aid instead of drawing it out unnecessarily. The more stimulation you remove, the sooner you'll get through this. Number 3. Time. The last point is that no matter what you do, it simply takes time. You can do things to make this period go by quicker and get more out of it, but it is going to take time. You can't skip the process entirely. So if you do experience anhedonia, remember that this will pass. Even if all you do is sit around and feel sorry for yourself, it will get better. So at this point, it's clear that you'll generally not be having a good time if you're experiencing anhedonia. However, this can still be a very useful time for certain things. Anhedonia can give you clarity that you otherwise don't have, and it's a good time to do some introspective writing. Specifically, I recommend this. Use writing to express your feelings of frustration and joylessness and hopelessness and whatever else is going on. It is always useful to give yourself a way to express your feelings honestly. And just to be clear, the goal here is not to come to a solution or come to a satisfying conclusion. It's just about expressing what's actually going on. The next thing I recommend is to use this as an opportunity to write down all of the things that you're fed up with. Write down the things that you're upset about, and the things that you no longer want to put up with in your life. When you're going through an especially difficult time, you can have great clarity about what exactly it is that you want to change in your life. You can use that dissatisfaction and eventually turn it into anger and draw a line in the sand where you say, no more of this. I am not going back to this. This is something I always try to remind myself to do whenever I'm having an especially bad time. It's a time for me to make a list of all the things I'm fed up with. And look, usually in that state, I don't have the motivation or the energy to actually solve these problems. But that list is useful afterwards. Once I start feeling better, that list is a reminder, look, here are the areas of my life that I have to deal with. Here are things I need to confront and change. And if I don't, I'll probably end up feeling as bad as I did before pretty soon in the future again. The most important thing to remember when you are experiencing anhedonia is this: it gets better. I know it feels like it will never get better. That's part of the experience. It feels like, oh my God, I feel terrible and I will feel like this forever. And it is good to remember that the first part of that is true, but the second part is an assumption. It's simply a story you're telling yourself. So when exactly does it get better? How long does anhedonia last? Unfortunately, the only truthful answer here is that it's different for everyone. There is no fixed timeline for this. Anhedonia can last anything from a couple of days to weeks to even months. But one thing I will say about this as a guideline: if you follow the recommendations I've given here and your state of anhedonia lasts for more than 3 months, that is a good time to seek professional help, because at that point you might be experiencing chronic depression. Depression is kind of like a long-lasting version of anhedonia, and I know from personal experience how difficult it can be to deal with. So if this happens to you, get help and get support. Seeking therapy can be a good idea here. However, beware to not let them just put you on a bunch of antidepressants of dubious effectiveness. The real solutions to depression do not come in the form of a pill. Finally, it's also good to remember that when you're experiencing anhedonia and you have all these cravings to get back into your addiction, to get back into some source of stimulation, remember that those sources of stimulation really are not a solution to the problems you're facing right now. Maybe you didn't realize it, but you can be in a state of anhedonia even while being an active addict. Think of people who are in a zombie-like state, gambling at a casino all day or doom scrolling through some feed all day. They're not having a good time. They are already in a state of anhedonia. It's just that they need to turn away from the source of addiction for a moment to realize it. So if you are in a state of withdrawal and you're experiencing anhedonia, yes, that really sucks, but in many ways it's already a step improvement over being an active addict. So now you know exactly what anhedonia is, why it happens, and what to do and not to do in order to get through this really difficult but sometimes necessary experience. And let me just emphasize that not everybody experiences anhedonia when they withdraw from an addiction. It's also not equally severe for everyone, so don't expect that this will definitely happen, and don't expect that it will happen on a very specific timeline. Like all things with addictions and withdrawals, this is highly individual. But whatever may come with the tips from this video, you'll be able to handle it. If you have any other questions about this topic, go ahead and leave a comment below. And also, if you appreciate the kind of content I make, leave a comment, leave a like, share it with a friend, engage with this content. It really makes a huge difference to give the algorithm a signal to go and show this to more people.